How do you feel when you try something and it comes easily to you? Are you driven by your own natural talent and passion to pursue it further, or do you find yourself not really challenged and easily moving on to something else? The idea of wasted talent is very real. Things come so easily that people often don't work as hard. We've seen that in many walks of life, but what happens in the story of BJ Penn kind of goes beyond that. His ability as a natural talent in combat sports was truly 1 in 6 billion, but even with every built-in advantage that helped him succeed, behind the wheel of BJ Penn's career was a man whose legendary achievements did nothing to stop him from slamming his career into brick wall after brick wall. And the person BJ Penn blamed it all on was himself. I'm Balian from MMA On Point, and this is the story of BJ Penn, the man too talented to train. Chapter 1. The Prodigy Emerges. Hawaii has got to be one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth, but if Jurassic Park taught me one thing, it's just because somewhere looks like paradise doesn't mean you won't have to fight for your life. BJ's early years in Hawaii ended up being filled with conflict, and it became the kind of thing he started to look for. BJ was one of 4 sons, the youngest named after his father Jay, so he became Baby Jay. And it's not that surprising, like a lot of young lads, that he loved wrestling and action films.
BJ was probably the most different of all my sons.
He was a big fan of Hulk Hogan and Rocky Balboa.
BJ never really turned down a fight.
For him, it's his form of playing.
BJ seemed to want a reputation for himself as a guy that wouldn't back down from a scrap no matter what. BJ was always looking for a fight.
I noticed BJ was slowing down, and there was some kid
Yelled out to him, "Hey, you like fight? You like scrap?" BJ just stopped, got off his bike, laid it down, put up his hand, said, "Let's go."
Now, at this point, BJ hadn't had any kind of training, really. He was just getting into it with anyone and everyone he could. In fact, it sounds like he started taking it a little too far.
about 4 of them that always just drove around, and they got into a whole bunch of fights. My dad was like, we got to get BJ into something.
His dad managed to convince him to try a martial art, to learn some discipline, some structure. But Penn wasn't really that interested.
My dad was a judo black belt. He kind of pushed me towards jiu-jitsu. You're not gonna hang out here and just be down at the beach every day doing nothing.
Just so happened a Taekwondo instructor by the name of Tom Callis moved to the Big Island. He was kind of done teaching Taekwondo and he just wanted to have some people to wrestle around with, to do jiu-jitsu with.
But the day he tried Brazilian jiu-jitsu for the first time would truly become a historic moment, not just for himself, but for the whole of combat sports.
So I went down and yeah, me and Tom rolled around and he choked me out and he arm locked me. And then right there, my mind started going. So I was like, man, with this, I could beat up everybody in Hilo. I'll rule Hilo.
Penn was already obsessed, and it turned out Tom, the former Taekwondo guy, already had learned and trained BJJ in California with this guy called Ralph Gracie, and he wanted to bring BJ along. So Penn got on a flight and headed out to the mainland.
I remember first going into Ralph's gym. I thought I could tap Ralph out, I thought I could beat everybody. Ralph Gracie ends up telling Tom, the guy who brought me up there, that hey, this kid, he could be really good. He could be very, very good.
As BJ tells it, his dad said, if you're not doing anything by the summer, if you're not at school, then I'm sending you back to California. A few months went by, and that's what he did. It was a decision, though, that would change the whole trajectory of BJ Penn's life.
I wasn't even that into jiu-jitsu. I didn't even love it, really. But I remember telling her, I said, I think I found my calling. I think I found what I'm supposed to do in life.
His dad got him a studio near Ralph's gym, and BJ rode his bike there every day. But he didn't have any friends. He didn't like the weather. All he would do was watch TV when he wasn't training jiu-jitsu. It took him 6 months, though, to get to blue belt, and eventually another 18 months to get to purple. And then he wanted to know what the next level was, and everyone told him he had to go to Brazil. Penn eventually settled on Nova União, a legendary gym in Rio de Janeiro, home to future UFC champions like Jose Aldo and Renan Barão. Now, the gym was being run then by the same guy as always, Andre Pelinares, who continued BJ's instruction for another 16 months, and he was the one who granted him his brown belt and eventually his black belt. Just 1 week later, BJ Penn was heading to the World Championships as a black belt.
Instantly, we know a whole nother level. I mean, there had to have been probably over 200 jiu-jitsu practitioners.
I kind of took it serious, but it was never like, this is, it wasn't everything to me.
The first match, BJ got by a tough veteran on points. and then he beat another top guy in round 2, and all of a sudden, he was going to the finals. Even though martial arts wasn't really BJ Penn's life yet, he knew he was about to make history if he won, and he knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Doesn't matter if my arm breaks or my leg breaks, I'm gonna win this match.
After a methodical match, he took his time setting up an armbar, forcing Edson to tap and crowning himself the first ever non-Brazilian to win a world championship as a black belt. 21 years old, 3.5 years of training, it was completely unheard of, and it still is. And he earned a new name, simply the only word that could describe him: the prodigy.
I looked around at everybody, and the Brazilians couldn't even believe it. Somebody with 3.5 years and won the most prestigious tournament in the world.
It was clear that BJ Penn was both impossibly naturally gifted and dedicated, but things wouldn't always stay that way. BJ continued his training, and a friend of his, a guy named John Lewis, told BJ about some private lessons that he had been given some billionaires, some guys called Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White. So in January of 2001, they bought the UFC for $2 million, and now were looking for the right kind of fighters for the new direction that they were taking. BJ had his black belt and his BJJ World Championship. He asked John Lewis, "What do you think? Can you get me in the UFC?"
They loved BJ. They knew his accomplishments. They brought him in. We talked to him. We went through the contract. So excited that BJ was fighting in the UFC that we pretty much agreed to whatever they were saying.
Chapter 2. Unfulfilled Potential. Despite everything BJ Penn had already achieved, as he tells it, he was incredibly nervous for his UFC debut, even crying in the locker room before his fight. He was going from just a street punk in his own eyes to fighting another trained opponent in the octagon.
The only reason why I'm stepping in the octagon is to be the champion.
The most decorated jiu-jitsu athlete in America is BJ Penn.
So BJ was just bursting with nervous energy, but his debut was nothing short of pure domination, and not just with his jiu-jitsu, but with his hands. BJ crushed Joey Gilbert and immediately declared himself one of the best lightweights on the planet.
BJ Penn, impressive, closing out round number 1 in style.
1 month later, BJ was back at the next UFC show facing off against the 12-1 Dean Thomas. In 2001, he was an absolute lightweight force to be reckoned with. And he'd already beaten the champion Pulver outside of the UFC. BJ was once again, just like at the World BJJ Championships, walking into a fight against a guy with years and years more experience. Penn showed off flashes of his incredible flexibility and guard, and when it hit the feet, BJ just showed clinical striking. He was beginning to truly look not just like the prodigy, but an MMA one as well. He had the black belt, he also had the knockout power. Everyone was massively impressed. BJ was immediately catapulted to a #1 contenders fight against the former title challenger Carl Uno. And even with the UFC fan base being as small as it was, the hype around BJ Penn had built to astronomical levels. BJ sprinted to the cage, then Uno sprinted at BJ from the bell, and in 11 absolutely electrifying seconds, he annihilated the former world champion. Then he ran out of the building like he was going all the way to the top. He was going to fight for a world title. With this title shot, if he was to win the title, he'd become the youngest champion in UFC history at 23 years and 1 month old. Now, not even John Jones, who'd later become and still is the youngest champion ever, who holds that record. He was 23 years and 8 months. And in January 2002, he was booked to fight Jens Pulver for the UFC Lightweight Championship. A victory here would still stand the test of time as one of the greatest accomplishments ever in mixed martial arts. What you might not know about BJ Penn's career, though, is that it almost didn't exist.
I'm going to win this lightweight title, and I'm going to retire, and I'm going to walk away from the sport. This is it. I'm done. Proved I was the best in the world of jiu-jitsu. I'm going to come in the UFC. I'm going to win all these fights. I'm going to become the world champion. I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to be done.
BJ had been built up as a massive favorite going up against the champion Jens. Pulver was thought of by all accounts as the underdog. But he fought tooth and nail with BJ as the two men pushed each other back and forth. In the closing seconds of the third, BJ locked in an armbar, but right after the horn sounded, Pulver actually tapped. But it didn't matter, the round was over and the battle continued. Going into the fifth, Pulver had dragged the fight out of Penn, and the momentum was slowly moving in his direction.
Wanted that lightweight championship belt, and I wanted to put that thing on my dresser right next to my jiu-jitsu gold medal.
As the 5th round started, the online scoring, yeah, they had that even in 2002, said that Pulver was up and that BJ really needed to push the action to take the final round. Penn, though, has talked about how he felt he had been over-preparing and pushing himself too far in training during the last 2 months. And apparently he also had a leg injury that a massage therapist told him could lead to muscle atrophy. And also, just to quote him from his autobiography, "I wasn't so sure I was prepared to be a champion." The 5th round began, and every time BJ stepped forward, Pulver countered. BJ just didn't know what to do and was completely gassed. And then it was all over. So it went to the scorecards, and Jens had took the win from BJ, and at the same time, single-handedly changed the MMA timeline.
I look back on that loss to Jens Pulver. Mixed martial arts wasn't done with me. If I would have won that fight, we wouldn't be sitting here right now doing this interview. If I would have beat Jens Pulver that night, I would have walked away and I would be where you guys are right now, just watching, smiling, and having fun.
I mean, BJ would go on later to say that he thinks he was trying to avenge his loss to Jens Pulver for the rest of his career. After this loss, he started to question whether he had been truly prepared to become a world champion, and he returned to Hawaii. But that meant Penn started to hang out with his old friends and ended up drinking pretty much every night, partying, doing everything he was doing before he left in the first place. But he still had 1 fight left on his UFC contract, and it wasn't long before they picked up the phone. The training camp BJ put together in Hawaii was made up of whoever he could find. It was still enough to beat his next UFC opponent, Paul Creighton, who he absolutely steamrolled. The UFC lightweight title, though, suddenly became vacant after Jens Pulver left for better options, and a tournament is set up once again for BJ to fight for the belt. But in the first round of the tournament against Matt Serra, we saw a different BJ Penn. He knocked down Serra in the second round, but come the third, he wasn't able to push the pace, seemed very gassed. The crowd were even booing by the end of the fight. And those online fans that I mentioned, well, they even scored it for Matt Serra. The truth was, BJ did not take his training camp seriously whatsoever. He wasn't in fighting shape and admitted that his diet was terrible. Just burgers, ribs, meats covered in cheese. Apparently, being from jiu-jitsu where you could be fat and still win, he said he didn't really see why this was a problem. For BJ though, next up was a rematch with Uno, who he blasted in 11 seconds, and confidence, was not going to be an issue.
Take me through that fight, man. How's that going to go?
It's gonna go just like the last one.
It was a second chance though to become a world champion, and once again his cardio became a massive factor in the fight. After 3 close rounds, BJ was admittedly completely exhausted. He said he couldn't hear his corner anymore, and he summoned everything he had to go the last 2. The belt needed to go to someone, but it was a draw. The lightweight division had no new champion, and it changed MMA history forever. The result had made BJ sick to his stomach, and he questioned if he still even wanted to be a fighter. BJ asked, though, the UFC to bring over Takanori Gomi from Japan. And when they said they couldn't do it, BJ and his brother JD went about setting up another Rumble on the Rock event for BJ Penn to headline against the Japanese knockout star. Supposedly, Dana White even supported BJ's plan as long as he was going to eventually fulfill his UFC contract. So BJ went to train this time at Team Quest in Portland, Oregon with John Hackleman, Liddell, and Randy Couture, teaching seminars and again completely falling into an obsession with martial arts, with Randy himself becoming a key training partner and new mentor for the Prodigy. With 8 months off training, BJ returned to the cage at Rumble on the Rock 4 to headline and take on Gomi. BJ was looking good, but there were still some questions.
Let's just hope BJ's not gassed out. He went really hard in that first round. Nice.
Oh, and a right hand by BJ Penn.
Is he gonna tap? He's gonna go sleep.
Tap. Unbelievable. BJ Penn has done it. He's tapped Gomi. Naked choke. Unbelievable.
BJ almost won.
BJ had just put a beating on who some considered the #1 lightweight in the world. But even though Dana White, who apparently congratulated BJ personally, there was still no lightweight category for him to return to in the UFC. After his draw against Uno, the UFC had just closed down the division, and BJ still had 1 fight left on his UFC contract. He'd looked more impressive than ever. He'd found a new gym that clearly helped him get ready for the war against Gomi. But what happened next completely shook the MMA world and truly cemented his title as the Prodigy.
And at that time, there's a person in the welterweight class who's just destroying everybody. I think he was at that time maybe 28-1. UFC didn't have anybody to fight him all over the world. He fought everybody they could bring in.
Hughes was on a 13-fight win streak, and he'd finished all but 2 of them. it was true. The UFC didn't really know what to do with him next. And considering BJ was up for it.
So I called up Dana White. I said, BJ wants to fight Matt Hughes. He goes, you're kidding me. I said, no, I have him right here. He wants to fight him. He says, you know what? Let's put that together. I like that fight.
After failing to win the belt twice now and returning to the UFC upper weight class against this impossibly dominant champion, the most dominant champion ever, BJ was, of course, a massive underdog. And once again, he returned to Oregon to train with Team Quest to prepare for Matt Hughes, ready to shock the world. In an absolutely epic, iconic performance, BJ blew through Matt Hughes' defenses and choked him out with just 20 seconds left in the first round. It was all too much for Penn. He was completely overcome with emotion.
When you work so hard for something and then you finally get damn it. I know I'm the best. When we were fighting even, I was like, I'm fighting one of my idols right now.
At the time, it was seen as one of the most incredible achievements in the sport. At 24 years old, he was now not only a BJJ prodigy, but an MMA one as well. But unfortunately though, BJ's career would take another turn. It was time to negotiate a new UFC contract, and Penn was not happy with what was being offered.
Wow, I mean, he's a champion now. Isn't he going to get more money or more value?
Now, of course, it's important to remember that with a lot of this is only one side of the story, BJ Penn's.
Getting kind of a dispute with the UFC, and at the same time, K1, which is at that time the largest mixed martial arts company in the world, and they're offering a lot more than what the UFC is offering.
But in fact, the story goes that he ran into Joe Rogan at an airport, and they got talking about his next opponent. Now, BJ mentioned K1. And by the time he'd landed, his phone was blowing up with messages from Dana White, completely pissed.
The UFC wanted to start me up from the exact same money. They didn't even want to increase it, not even by $1.
The UFC apparently didn't want to match the K1 offer that BJ says was $187,000 per fight. Now, his reported payout for the Hughes fight was apparently $25K to show, $25K to win. But then issues came up with the contract, which apparently had already expired a month before BJ even fought.
You guys are scorched earth. You never can fight again in the UFC. If you guys fight in there, I'm going to strip BJ. So we're like, well, you got to do what you got to do.
So he entered contract negotiations with K1, and then BJ was heading to Japan. His first fight, Dwayne Ludwig, a student of Bas Rutten who was best known for flatlining Jens Pulver after he'd left the UFC, technically still the champion. This was just the sort of test BJ was looking for, but his feud with the UFC was not over yet. BJ took him down, beat him up, and sunk in the submission. BJ was destroying those he thought was supposed to be his competition. But it didn't matter because since he'd been stripped of his title by the UFC, Penn decided he wanted to pursue legal action to get it back. He sued them, and so BJ went back to taking fights he thought that mattered to the fans. For the next 4 years, Penn would compete at any weight class other than 155. K1 though let BJ know when his next fight would be, and then 2 weeks before the date they called to say, oh yeah, the undefeated heavyweight karate champion Lyoto Machida. And to quote BJ from his autobiography, I didn't give a shit what anyone thought, I was gonna throw overhand rights all day long and make him pay for wanting to fight me. BJ though was once again completely exhausted and of course completely out of shape. He weighed in at 191 pounds for this fight, alright? That's almost light heavyweight. He ended up losing the fight on the scorecards and was so completely spent he couldn't even make it back to the locker room, having to lay down on the ground underneath the bleachers in the stadium. Meanwhile, his lawsuit with the UFC ended up going to trial and ruled in the UFC's favour. It wasn't until apparently though BJ and Dana White were left in a room together that they actually settled their differences, agreeing to let BJ compete as long as he got to fight the best welterweights, which is all he kind of wanted.
Kind of came to the point where we're sitting down and we're like, you know what, Dana, let's just put this thing back together. We're going to announce that BJ's back in the UFC tomorrow night, one of our biggest UFCs. We'll bring him into the cage. Nobody's going to believe it, and it's going to be huge.
I think that our 170-pound division is probably one of the most exciting divisions in the world. Check out the new welterweight I just signed.
He walks into the cage. BJ said he's so happy he's back. Hugs Dana.
The return of the prodigy was going to be massive. Chapter 3, the peak of discipline.
Champions are made in the off season, but I really didn't take it to heart.
Even though he was back in the UFC, BJ wasn't immediately back in top form. He got what he wanted though, one of the best welterweights, Georges St. Pierre, and once again, he prepared back home in Hawaii.
I feel the privilege to fight this guy, and if I would not fight him, he would probably be one of my favorite fighters.
I think I trained 1 hour a day, a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour at night. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I was partying like, it doesn't matter. I'll just get into shape in 2 months and I'll beat this guy.
Although BJ would bloody up GSP early, once again, his cardio completely failed him as the wrestling of St. Pierre took over and just nullified BJ's jiu-jitsu game.
George Rush St. Pierre!
Pretty much I fell into a pretty deep depression and really lost a fight for a little while and stuff. And then same thing I did before the St. Pierre fight, I did right after the St. Pierre fight. Went to the bar, hung out, with all my friends and did exactly the same stuff.
But out of the blue, Penn's fortunes seemed to change when he received a phone call about the welterweight title fight.
St. Pierre tore his ACL. He hurt his knee. He's out of the fight. You versus Matt Hughes. First thing came to my head. This is destiny.
Because of the short notice, well, he barely had a training camp. He said he trained seriously for about 12 days. Matt came out looking to strike, but when he did shoot, BJ's takedown defense was still impenetrable. In the second round, BJ took Matt's back and nearly had him finished.
And I spun to the triangle and I tried to pull his arm, tried to arm lock him, I tried to do all these things, but I gotta give it to him, he defended well.
And BJ was now completely exhausted.
I go to get off the ground to walk back to mine, and I knew something is wrong, but still I'm in that same mindset. I'm here for a reason. This is destiny. I'm gonna win this fight.
Penn then became a punching bag for Hughes in round 3.
So we come out for the third round and just nothing. I had nothing.
He collapsed to the ground when Matt finished him.
This fight is dangerously close to being stopped.
He yelled to the referee, who was Big John McCarthy, "Jesus Christ, Big John, are you gonna stop this thing?"
Turns out BJ had also broken a rib from the fight, but nothing could change the fact that he'd been finished for the first time in his career. Not just that, he'd been dominated and lost his chance at the welterweight title, and he ballooned up to over 180 pounds.
I just lost 2 fights. Everybody must be thinking my career's done. I was even questioning what now. The depression just got worse.
First though, he approached a new trainer, Rudy Valentino, who agreed to help, but on one condition.
And I told him he has to change his act because martial arts is respect. He didn't understand what martial arts was.
From the lowest point in his career, BJ Penn was offered the exact opportunity he needed to turn his entire career around. A rematch of his very first defeat. A chance to run it back with Jens Pulver. The UFC put them together as coaches for season 5 of The Ultimate Fighter, and they went head to head, building massive anticipation for BJ's return to lightweight and a rematch of the massive fight that had kickstarted the entire division. This time, BJ reached out to a nutritionist and a conditioning coach to help him prepare. He was told to change his lifestyle, his eating habits, and BJ once again sought out another head coach, this time boxing coach Jason Perillo. And for the first time in a long time, BJ had an actual training camp that he wasn't in charge of.
I knew I had to improve my conditioning. That was the only problem that I ever had.
He came in looking in fantastic shape. BJ put a pace on Jens and crushed him on the mat.
Man, I remember as soon as I got the mount position, I was like, for all the times that you ran your mouth, for all the time that I was out of the lightweight championship, and I'm gonna make you pay for everything right now. I just remember hitting him as hard as I could, elbowing him, and just really trying to hurt him really bad. I was trying to kill him.
Oh, BJ trapped his left arm. Oh, that's sunk. That's sunk. That's over. Oh, BJ Penn!
I was waiting for that victory for 5 years, and to finally put it all behind me and just move on and not think about it anymore. Oh, you beat guys who can beat Jens. It didn't matter. I wanted to do it myself.
The champion Sean Shirk was set to defend against Hermes Franca, but both men would go on to test positive for performance enhancers, leaving the lightweight division once again without a champion.
Isn't it obvious that he's on something, the way he looks and the way he's looked for the last 10 years, but I wanted to fight the champion, Shirk was the champion. Anybody who does steroids to smash my face in personally, while I'm playing by the rules, I got a serious problem with that guy. All the kids out there, don't do it. Don't take steroids.
It would be BJ Penn versus Joe Daddy Stevenson for the interim title.
The winner of the interim championship will fight Sean Shirk for the steroid championship.
Like a month before the fight, I heard that Stevenson has been asking for this fight for a while, so I was like, okay, well, you're asking for this, I'm really gonna hurt you then.
Yeah. I'm definitely in shape for this fight, as in shape as I've ever been.
The prodigy blew right through Joe Daddy. He cut him open bad and finished him in his own blood in the second round before licking it off in celebration. Now it was time to take out the former champion.
Shirk was going around telling everybody that I'm not the real champion. He was getting upset that I kept telling everybody that he was a coward and all these things because he was taking steroids.
The fight played out perfectly for BJ. Shirk stood and tried to counterpunch BJ's vicious jab while every takedown he shot was stuffed. Shirk had won 34 fights and never lost at lightweight.
The story of this fight is etched in Sean Shirk's face.
BJ continued the beating and landed a massive flying knee in the closing seconds that ended the show.
The fans of the sport, do you want GSP? Do you want BJ Penn to fight GSP?
I think we have our answer.
The rematch with Georges St. Pierre was just too good for the UFC to resist. It was going to be the first UFC super fight. It was going to be the greatest fight of all time. Chapter 4, the super fight. BJ had apparently done what was requested of him by Dana White, stay at 155 and cleared out the division. But that is not what Penn wanted. He was always looking to fight the best guy possible. Same kid from Hilo, wanting to prove he's the baddest. The UFC booked BJ Penn vs Georges St. Pierre in their first champion versus champion super fight. And it was probably the most promoted fight of all time back then.
This is one of those fights that 50 years from now, people will be talking about it.
I see myself just a much more determined fighter. He's going to be hitting me hard, and I'm not going to back down, and I'm going to keep coming forward and keep coming forward.
But it's not only about skills, like you said. It's true, it's about heart. And I got a lot of heart, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen.
I think the guy that walks out the winner is on his way to becoming a superstar.
But frustratingly for BJ, one of the questions he kept getting asked was, are you going to train harder for this fight? Knowing that against GSP the first time, BJ Penn did not show up in the training room. In fact, these interviews you have been seeing throughout this entire video came from a documentary that BJ put out called 90 Days. But things quickly became overwhelming for BJ. He had a newborn baby girl, he was hosting a local fight show at his gym, UFC Countdown had their camera crew, and Hilo was no longer the heaven of peace it had been for Penn. In fact, with all these pressures mounting, BJ just ghosted the UFC camera crew and told them all to leave, and Dana told him he'd better be focusing on training. And when footage came out of both men in their training camps, well, it only gave fans more concern that perhaps BJ still was levels behind GSP. And everything that was coming out on BJ's YouTube was just of him lifting weights. And what happened at UFC 94 actually broke the internet as Sherdog servers and message boards crashed. It felt like the biggest fight of all time, and the tension kept building as both men entered the octagon. But it was pretty one-sided. GSP was able to take him down and control him, and Penn just got more and more tired as the grappling and ground and pound assault continued. The end of the fourth was not good.
BJ Penn is getting crushed.
GSP punched the cage as the bell sounded, half fired up, half in frustration that BJ just wasn't giving him any challenge. Jason Perillo took a look at BJ and called it. The loss was obviously devastating, but things, unfortunately, were about to get worse. In the locker room after the fight, two commissioners came up to BJ and they told him they caught GSP greasing, i.e. putting Vaseline on his body. The NSAC opened a legal case that Pierre had cheated.
The application of a substance that would cause his body to be slippery. If you watch the second round, you'll notice the effect that that grease had on the body. He had no grip, he had no ability to grip. Mr. Pierre was able to slip in and out of his guard.
Unfortunately though for BJ, the NSAC didn't buy any of it and didn't punish Georges St. Pierre. Everyone kind of just moved on, seeing that it didn't really change the outcome of the fight.
I still want my fair fight, man. I didn't get my fair fight. I want my fair shot.
The thing that I can do to piss him off even more, it's helping Kenny Florian to kick his ass. I did cheat, but not in a way that people think. In BJ Penn entry to the octagon, when he's walking to the octagon, I hire a man to kiss BJ Penn on the mouth.
He knew he needed to change, but he still hadn't got things quite right, as one of his sponsors put him in contact with a new training method going on in San Diego. It was run by a guy called Marv Marinovich, known for having coached his son Todd with an experimental strength and conditioning program that had made him look like an experiment.
Todd became a mythological figure in high school. His dad pretty much raised him from the cradle to be this great athlete.
He's been called the Bionic Kid, Todd Terrific, and the Stepford Quarterback.
The pre-game meal for 17-year-old Todd Marinovich is like every meal he's ever eaten. No meat, no sugar, no preservative. Just fruits and vegetables, grains and cereals. all prepared by his father.
From the moment BJ met him, he knew things were different. Penn put complete trust in their new system for his next fight, a title defense against the 6-fight win streak of Kenny Florian. BJ was getting in insane shape under this new system. BJ said he had never felt better about preparing for a fight in his entire life. At this point in his career, BJ had never won a fight that went past 3 rounds, by the way, and BJ kept up his pace the entire fight, even in the 4th, chasing Kenny down and taking him down. And then it was all vintage BJ Penn. Penn looked incredible, like the best lightweight on the planet, bar none, and he'd just blown through the division's top contender on a 6-fight win streak. The prodigy was back, and for his next title fight, BJ committed to do exactly the same thing.
I think it was a good thing for me to get out to California, and the Marinovich brothers, they really helped me a lot, and I think we can surpass what we did in the last fight.
With his belt defended once again, the UFC then granted Diego Sanchez, winner of the first season of The Ultimate Fighter and undefeated as a lightweight, the next shot at Penn's title.
He's explosive, he's in great shape, he's good at jiu-jitsu, and he knows his striking. And
is he your strongest challenge at 155?
Well, he's the next challenge in line. I guess they feel he's the biggest threat, so I guess he's the strongest challenge, you know.
And in the build-up, though, BJ seemed more motivated and more in love with the sport than ever.
It just all starts making so much sense to me again. This is fun.
It was also an opportunity to make history again, as a win would break the record for most UFC lightweight title defenses, and when he put on another clinical performance looking like an absolute force of nature, he was declared as such.
That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the greatest lightweight in the history of the sport.
I think at this point, it would be harsh to do anything but praise the achievements of BJ Penn. Perhaps he had neglected his training regime and his health at points in his career, but he'd just set a world record that wouldn't be beaten for 15 years. But BJ would fight again in just 4 months, and despite the success he'd had under the Marinovich system, he breaks off his relationship with them. Chapter 5. The End of the Road. As the story goes, the Marinoviches had always done the strength and conditioning sessions in the morning, and now BJ wanted to do them at night, so he wasn't just super tired for the rest of his training all day. Marv said that's not how he does things. And then just 1 month before BJ's 4th title defense against Frankie Edgar, BJ Penn was running his own program once again. The results of their first fight were, and still are by some, highly disputed. Although BJ started out well, Frankie Edgar was clearly the much faster man. The fight was incredibly close, but BJ, he just didn't look like himself, some people said. And it turned into his first loss at lightweight in 8 years. And when you break down the rest of BJ Penn's career, things kind of get even more poetic. This guy was going to retire undefeated if he never lost to Jens in 2002. Instead, for the next 8 years, he would never lose another fight at lightweight, constantly, as he said, chasing to get that first loss to Pulver back. And then when he finally did lose again to Frankie Edgar, the story of the prodigy was effectively over, and BJ would never win again at lightweight. An immediate rematch was booked against Frankie Edgar for just a few months later, but an even poorer performance from BJ just led to a lot more questions about how hard he'd been training and the actual credibility of his camp under his brothers. And again, for the first time in a while, cardio appeared to be an issue for BJ Penn. People start questioning if he has the hunger and the drive anymore to compete. Not only had he now lost for the first time at lightweight since Jens Pulver, but BJ decided that after those 2 losses, it was time to start retiring. He posted on his website, hanging the gloves up to the fans, "Thank you for all the love and support you have given me." And this is ultimately the point of no return for BJ Penn as the best fighter on the planet. Just 2 months later, he was booked against Matt Hughes at welterweight. BJ did score, though, a fantastic win against Matt Hughes, ending it in just the first round. But after that, he was also just no longer the kid he was back in 2002. And he just couldn't keep up with the young talent anymore. He goes on to retire 4 more times, after taking a brutal beating from Nick Diaz that had everyone concerned for his health.
It's probably the last time you're ever going to see me in here. I can't keep, I want to perform at the top level. I don't want to go home looking like this.
I want BJ Penn to retire.
And then after trying to make a comeback, this time at featherweight, and again losing in a trilogy fight against Frankie Edgar.
This is the end. I'm thinking to myself, why did you step back in the octagon after the beating that Roy McDonald gave you? Because I really needed to find out. If I didn't make this night happen for myself, I would have always wondered, and I would have I've always begged Dana to let me get back in. I guess I needed some closure.
Finally, in 2019, he was essentially forced by Dana White publicly to stop fighting. Going into a veterans matchup against Clay Guida, Dana simply said,
"Win, lose, or draw, this is BJ Penn's last fight."
And it was BJ's 7th loss in a row. 8 years since his last win. It wasn't until footage emerged of Penn in an altercation in the street in Hawaii that he just closed those doors forever.
He won't fight again.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. BJ needs to he needs to focus on his personal life and get himself together before he thinks about fighting again.
It's no secret that all of that has affected his legacy. That many losses, it does change fans' opinions of you, but BJ just didn't want to stop fighting. He never did. He'd been doing it since he was a kid growing up.
I really do want to just fight for the rest of my life. Like, even if I did go out, run for mayor or something, this and that, like, it feels like you could never stop, really. There'd be something missing.
It's not so easy to walk away from something that you've always been able to do, that you've always been good at. So much so that you were literally the best on the planet, and now you have to put that chapter behind you. Like I said, this part of his career isn't really what this video is about, because throughout this video now you've seen the moments of brilliance BJ was able to achieve, and we've gone over the self-sabotage that also at times held him back. What if he was able to stay under the guidance of a team and mentors like Nova União and Pederneiras, Javier Mendez and AKA, Hackelman and Team Quest and Randy Couture, and just keep his incredible form while working with the Marinovich brothers? Because at times, BJ Penn just didn't.
BJ Penn probably should have been one of the best ever to ever live to ever do it. I think BJ, in his own words, would go back and do things differently if he could.
Without a doubt though, BJ Penn did some truly incredible, record-breaking things in mixed martial arts. And I'm not just talking about the kind of achievements other people have gotten, like becoming a UFC champion. I mean, his impossible achievements in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that I don't think have ever been replicated. It seems that all newer fans have known is a BJ Penn who is a shadow of the furthest mystique that once surrounded him as perhaps the most gifted mixed martial artist of all time. Okay, and that's about it for the career of the legend, the prodigy, BJ Penn. I'm glad we could do this video and kind of touch on really a once in a generational career, doing some things that I don't think anybody will ever be able to replicate. That being said, of course, anyone who gives themselves to fighting as a career, it takes a toll on your body and sometimes on your mental health. And we do see that now with BJ Penn, that he appears to be struggling with both of those problems. I think I speak for a lot of the MMA community when I say we all wish him very well and hope that he gets the support he needs as a legend of the sport. If you really did enjoy this video though, please guys, give a big thank you to Luke Taylor, aka @CallToMe_the boy. Please go give him some thank yous. Follow him on social media. Shout out to all the Hall of Famers out there, you channel members. Guys, thank you very much for supporting this channel and making videos like this possible as well. I love bringing you these long form essays. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Let me know down below what you think of BJ, if you'd heard of him before. If you hadn't, has your opinion on him changed at all? Did you expect more? Did you expect less from him perhaps? Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. I've been Balian. Cheers.